At the very heart of all F1 cars is the power plant. Formula One's engines are regulated by FIA design rules and are restricted to 2.4 litre naturally aspirated V8s. Unlike road cars, which typically rev at a conservative 7,000 RPM, a high-performance Formula One engine spins out to very high revolutions per minute and can maintain revs of up to 20,000 RPM during a race. The torque of a Formula One engine, which is the power that actually gets to the ground, is not much higher than a conventional petrol engine. Consequently, high power is obtained by making the engine turn faster, a goal sought ever since research into performance engines began. The basic configuration of a naturally aspirated Formula One engine has not been greatly modified since the 1967 Cosworth. Until the mid-1980s, Formula One engines were limited to around 12,000 RPM, due to the traditional metal valve springs used inside the engine to close the valves. The groundbreaking technology of pneumatic valve springs introduced by Renault resulted in valves that can operate at higher RPM. Since the 1990s, all Formula One engine manufacturers now use pneumatic valve springs with a pressurized air, allowing engines to reach speeds of nearly 20,000 RPM. The 2006 generation of engines spun at up to 20,000 RPM and produced up to 780 horsepower. Following the engine specification freeze from the end of 2006, to keep costs down in F1, the current V8 engines will be restricted to 19,000 RPM, and very few opportunities for development will be allowed. F1 engines run on unleaded fuel, closely resembling publicly available petrol, and all these high revs result in high fuel consumption. After the running of the 2007 Grand Prix in Brazil, a controversy over small gains in saving fuel broke out. The extreme competitive nature of power and how it is obtained economically in F1 racing was highlighted. Checks after the race found that the temperature of the fuel pumped into the Williams BMW Sauber cars broke the technical regulations of being more than 10 degrees Celsius below the ambient temperature. Stewards found, however, that there was a considerable discrepancy between ambient temperatures recorded by Formula One management's timing monitors and the FIA contracted meteorologists, Meteo France. As cooler fuel is denser, more can be put into the tank and it can be fed in faster.
The colder the fuel, the smaller the volume, so if you've got a fixed size tank, you can put more volume in that tank because it's now shrunk the volume of the fuel. If you're feeding it through a hole through the fuel filler, more will go through the hole per second than if it was warmer. So you can speed up the refueling rate by a fraction. But it's such a tiny percentage, it's minuscule. If somebody's lost an event by a lap, for example, as Hamilton did, claiming a man ahead of him had colder fuel would not have helped him. So the stewards were quite right to say, look, it's racing, we finish a race, let's celebrate the championship, leave it at that.
From 2006, the F1 engine must be at least 95 kilograms in weight with a 90-degree V8 of 2.4 litres maximum capacity with an oversized 98mm bore and a 39.7mm minimum stroke. A lot of technology that is now incorporated into the common family car is now banned from F1 racing. There can be no more than 2 inlet and exhaust valves per cylinder, no variable valve timing and no turbocharging. The crankcase and cylinder block must be made of cast or wrought aluminium alloys, and valves from alloys based on iron, nickel, cobalt or titanium. With the new regulations, one would expect a power reduction of around 20% from the older 3-litre engines, though in many cases performance of the car has been improved. In 2006, Toyota F1 announced an approximate 740 horsepower output at 19,000 revs per minute for its new RVX-06 engine, but real figures are of course difficult to obtain. Formula One is a sport where nothing stands still for long. The new engine regulations mean that the F1 teams will be constantly striving to squeeze the maximum available power out technology that is frozen in time, at least for the time being.